Back to Scripps News coverage of the 60th presidential inauguration, the second of Donald Trump, and the first since 1985 to be indoors. What you're watching now is the indoor version of the inaugural parade. Normally it takes place down Pennsylvania Avenue, one of the more iconic images of Inauguration Day. Today, though, happening inside an arena in downtown Washington, D.C. Now, before the festivities moved inside, this was originally supposed to have about 7,500 participants from 23 different states. That was supposed to represent, quote, all walks of life, including a variety of veterans groups, first responders, high schoolers, university marching bands, and equestrian groups. So we may have seen some changes because of the late decision to move this inside instead of down the streets of Washington, D.C. But speaking of someone who has been inside for a while now, we're going to bring in Alex Miller. She's been in this arena for a number of hours now. This was supposed to happen much earlier in the day, but because of all the pomp and circumstance that happened at the U.S. Capitol with the swearing in of Donald Trump, everything kind of got delayed a little bit. And of course, the marquee event we expect to happen as soon as this parade concludes, that is Donald Trump addressing the crowd there that has been waiting on pins and needles for a number of hours. And Alex, set the scene for us. What's it been like in that arena, and what does it feel like now that the festivities are officially underway?
Well, look, all 20,000 people pretty much look to be on their feet right now, enjoying the parade. This is obviously very much an abridged version of what the people in the parade were planning to do. Obviously, walking down Pennsylvania Avenue much further than walking around the court of Capital One Arena. But we've seen basically on the parade thus far honoring the hometowns of both President Trump and Vice President Vance. We first saw, aside from the honoring of the Butler Fire Department, we saw first the New York Military Academy, Trump's hometown, and then the Palm Beach Fire Department, and then back to seeing the New York City Police Department's Emerald Society pipes and drums. And so the first few things we saw were really an homage to where he grew up, where he lived for almost his entire life, and then obviously Palm Beach is where he has called home since he left the White House back in 2021, and now we are seeing Middletown High School, which is in Ohio, so we're seeing their cheerleaders, their marching band, you can see on one side their flag, and so it's a short, abridged version, Andrew, but people still look to be very much paying attention to, and I'm sure it's a lot more pleasant to watch these kinds of marches when you are a lot warmer than you would be outside.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there's this sort of historical tie-in that we can call back from the funeral of Jimmy Carter, because he was the first president to get out on that parade route. I was listening to an interview with him in preparation for the funeral, where he said that was one of the big surprises that he was really excited, was able to keep under the lid until it actually happened. Obviously, we are not going to see much walking from Donald Trump, and looks like J.D. Vance's son is feeling like maybe some in those arena do right now, slumped over as he watch these parade begin and continue on. But it is interesting, as you note, just the significance of some of these organizations that we see on our screen right now. I'm also looking at one group from West Des Moines, Iowa, which was pretty prominently featured, America's Patriotic Tractor, which of course Iowa was really both times the state that catapulted Donald Trump, most probably definitively in the latest election when he was able to handily win against Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley to a lesser extent. But, you know, for the group, for the folks who are on hand, I mean, it seems like the spirits are still pretty high, but I imagine that they're all getting a little anxious because it's not only going to be a speech. You said that there's a podium set up for the new president to actually sign some executive orders.
Yeah, there's a desk already set up chair ready to go. The presidential seal is on it. It's on the opposite side of the stage from the lectern where we expect Trump to give some unscripted remarks. We are expecting him to sign 9 executive orders, and we don't exactly know which 9 out of the 100 that he will sign here, but there have been a list of things that he has already said he wants to do on day one that he mentioned in that inaugural address that the people here were on their feet for. They were extremely excited about a lot of these immigration executive orders that he talked about. They were excited about some executive orders relating to gender. They were excited when he talked about the energy issue and drill baby drill. And so I think no matter what he signs, people are going to be very happy because a lot of these issues are the ones that propelled him back to the very place that he is right now. And, you know, for all of these people are here, they traveled a long way to see him. And I guess they're actually getting a longer opportunity to see him in person than they would if he was just driving by either in a motorcade or walking. But he tried, you know, he doesn't get to walk down the street as you just mentioned, but he did come in. He did just come in through a generic entrance, not the private entrance that we saw everybody else's family members come through. We're seeing right now a Boca Raton, which is also in Florida. It's right next to where he lives in Palm Beach, just a county over, I believe. And so he's, again, honoring the state that he lives in right now or has lived in up until this point. But, you know, I think this is an exciting moment for a lot of these people, but I will also say a lot of them have been in line and waiting since 5 o'clock in the morning, and so I think they really do want to hear from the president, want to hear his speak in person. A lot of these people have likely been to numerous Trump rallies, so they're used to probably the run of show and being a little bit behind, but this is a moment that, you know, they're really able to take in all of the pomp and circumstance that you would not normally get at a Trump rally. You do hear from a lot of important people at Trump rally that are important, I should say, to MAGA country, but you know, seeing all of these police departments and fire departments and cheerleaders and all of those things, it really reminds you of, you know, the point of this inauguration, to bring the country together in a way to talk about, to highlight, you know, the everyday person in the country. Now, this is not something that is specific to President Trump. This is something that we see during all inaugural parades, but it's different to see it inside and have people really be able to take it in a way that you might not actually be able to if you're walking down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, and I think the West Des Moines Patriotic Tractor Group, I think, is actually going to be after the Florida firefighters that we see on the screen right there. So I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit, according to what was the run of show, of course, before everything was moved inside. But just for folks who are trying to get a grasp of the events of the day, it started early this morning with President Trump, then President-elect Trump, attending church, then making what has become a really important visual stop at the White House, meeting with the outgoing administration. He met with President Joe Biden, something, of course, that did not happen 4 years earlier in 2021. The pair then made their way over to the U.S. Capitol, where they had the swearing-in ceremony in the rotunda. There was then a lunch and a review of the troops before making his way ultimately to where you are, Alex, the Capital One Arena. And worth noting that this is not the last event of the day. There are a number of other things that we expected going into the day. Who knows if some might get changed, cut, abbreviated, but we certainly expect to see Trump in the Oval Office at some point today before what is kind of the fun part of the day, which is the balls. Those famous inaugural balls where we have seen presidents dance with their wives. We've seen those iconic images of a little bit of romance between the president and the first lady. And those are supposed to start this evening and go well into the morning. So still a pretty solid day of events for President Trump, even after he speaks here at Capital One, which we know the president is normally not known for his brevity when giving public speeches, is he?
He is definitely not. So we do not know how long he's going to speak for, particularly because this is an unscripted remarks that we're going to hear from him. We are starting to see more marching bands come in from various states. There's one from Tennessee here. I will say, Andrew, I am curious what the people in Des Moines think of the fact that we are inside for this, considering what the Iowa caucuses look like in terms of weather. Incredibly chilly temperatures there the night that Trump was propelled forward in the Republican primary. You know, it's just, you know, different states have different standards for weather, but it will be funny to see what they think about it.
That is a good point, and I will say I am from Buffalo and still was very cold when I was outside earlier today. But I've been in D.C. for a while, so your blood kind of thins out anyway. Anyway, glad to see everyone is safe and warm, including you, Alex. We are going to take a quick break as this parade continues, but we're going to have more coverage in a short bit right here on Scripps News.
Welcome back to Capital One Arena, where we are having President Trump's inaugural parade indoors, of course, because it is bitterly cold here in Washington, D.C. So we are watching people who would have been walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, marching down Pennsylvania Avenue, have an opportunity to play their music for the new president of the United States. We first saw musicians from his home state of New York, from Palm Beach, Florida, where he lived, and also in Ohio, where Vice President Vance is from. But we are now starting to see people from all over the country, where you're seeing another another marching band come out. Now everybody has their opportunity to perform for the new president on a much smaller stage than they would have walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. They're basically doing a loop around Capital One Arena's floor. But everybody is pretty excited about it. I will say some people have started to sit down. The first couple minutes of this, everybody was on their feet. But some people still very excited to be here. The president looks engaged, and the First Lady as well. And the Vance children are definitely dancing along to the music. I'm not sure if you are able to see that at home. But this is a day that is very important to President Trump when it comes to being there for his supporters. And typically he would be able to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. It's not something that he is able to do this time, but when he entered, he walked through the crowd a little bit, kind of what he would have done if he was able to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue to interact with his supporters. Look, some of these people have been here for 12 to 14 hours, Andrew. So they are waiting to hear Trump speak. They want to hear him talk. They want to see him sign these 9 executive orders that we're expecting. But there is actually, Andrew, a long list of marching bands that we are expecting today.
Yeah, and Alex, even as we enjoy the pomp and the circumstance of these talented bands from around the country, there is some news that continues throughout the afternoon out of specifically the Senate. President Trump's nominee to lead the Pentagon got a little closer to confirmation. It was the Senate Armed Services Committee advanced Pete Hegseth's nomination to the full Senate, and the Senate is set to vote tonight to confirm Marco Rubio to be the next Secretary of State. So President Trump slowly getting his cabinet confirmed as we wait for him to take the stage at that Capital One Arena where you're seeing these images right now. And Alex, it's been so interesting. You've been there since the beginning of the festivities there. And it was really telling to see who was in the rotunda. There were about 800 folks, but it was still an intimate crowd, at least compared to what it would have been if it were outdoors. We saw a lot of tech moguls. We saw Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, some news from Vivek Ramaswamy that he is no longer going to head the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. But it was also interesting to see Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. They were in the overflow room, essentially, but they did get a speaking spot, at least Glenn Youngkin did, where you are in the preamble to this event, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting to see really who they prioritize. A lot of loyalists there. As you mentioned, the billionaire tech CEOs that we've seen. It looks as though the CEO of TikTok was sitting next to the Director of National Intelligence nominee, Tulsi Gabbard. She obviously has not yet been confirmed, but TikTok has, of course, been front and center in the news in the last few days as there was a quick shutdown of it. And his supporters, obviously, they're his cabinet officials there as well, right behind him, too, this morning.
All right, well, we continue our live coverage of the 60th presidential inauguration, one totally different than probably a lot of them that we have seen in the past, although 2021 was quite different, too, in the face of COVID. But we expect Donald Trump to speak soon, and we are going to bring you those remarks live when they happen. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break. back to Scripps News coverage of the 60th presidential inauguration. You're looking at images from what is this year's version of the inaugural parade happening in Capital One Arena in downtown D.C. We're going to take a moment and just soak it all in as marching bands and groups from around the country are parading around the arena in what is a cold, blustery day here in Washington, D.C.
Counting close to 300 from the Mississippi Valley State University Band. You know, since its founding, the band has consistently played a significant role at their university and across the United States. They have performed for athletic events, Mardi Gras parades, Rose Bowl parades, and many, many more. The Mississippi Valley State University Band takes great pride in presenting culturally diverse presentations for students, faculty, and the surrounding Mississippi communities. Take a look at that brass out there. Woo! That's just part of the big green marching machine. The Mean Green Marching Machine from Itta Bena, Mississippi, ladies and gentlemen. ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff.
Good evening, everybody. I was appointed by President Trump to be the special envoy for peace in the Middle East. And I'd like to describe to you some of the things we're doing and how it informs on President Trump's policies. First of all, it is an honor to stand before you today as I reflect on the enormity of the role that President Trump has tasked me with. I am constantly reminded of the privilege it is to serve under the leadership of my boss, President Donald J. Trump. His presidency has provided a clear, bold vision for the Middle East, and it is this vision that guides every step I take in the mission. President Trump's leadership has redefined what is possible in the pursuit of progress and stability in the Middle East. His decisive, pragmatic approach ensures that even the most entrenched conflicts are met with fresh perspectives and innovative strategies. His policies have already delivered remarkable successes, such as yesterday's release of hostages in Gaza. Thank you. This achievement demonstrates the strength of President Trump's leadership and the respect he commands on the global stage. It is yet another example of his ability to deliver results in the most complex and challenging situations. The Abraham Accords, a testament to his vision and determination, have also brought historic progress to the region, transforming old rivalries into new alliances. These agreements are not merely symbolic. They represent a practical roadmap for peace, economic cooperation, and mutual respect across nations. My role, as President Trump has tasked me, is straightforward yet profoundly challenging: to turn his vision into actionable outcomes. He sets the agenda, he lays the framework, and he inspires people like me into bold action. My responsibility is to implement his vision, engaging with leaders across the region to find pathways towards sustainable peace and stability. And let me tell you, having Donald Trump as a boss makes this task not only possible, but far more effective. President Trump's reputation as a leader who delivers results resonates far beyond Washington. Leaders in the Middle East know he means what he says. His ability to cut through bureaucratic gridlock and focus on tangible results is the game changer. It allows me to approach delicate negotiations with the confidence that the full weight of the United States is behind me. The principles President Trump has laid out for our approach to the Middle East and foreign
You've been
policy.
watching the Steve Witkoff, Trump's president-elect special envoy to the Middle East. He's at Capital One Arena. We will have more in just a short break.
Today.
Welcome back to Scripps News coverage of President Donald Trump's inauguration. We are going to take you back out to Capital One Arena, where at any moment we expect the newly inaugurated president to take the stage.
An unattainable dream. It is a goal within our reach, made possible by strong leadership and unwavering commitment. Under President Trump's guidance, we are proving that the impossible can become reality. Thank you, but I have one more thing to say. We have some special people for me to introduce you to tonight. President Trump has been talking to them as well. They are the families of hostages from Israel who have been in Gaza for the last year and a half. There are many of them here today. Several of the families have lost children and loved ones, and they're here because they're part of an effort to retrieve their bodies so they can be buried in a proper way. Several have children who are still in captivity. There is an American family here whose loved one is scheduled to come out in 14 days, and they're going to be meeting the president tonight. So let's give them all some love and a big hand. Come on up. And now, I get to introduce my dear friend and the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you. So now the work begins. We won, but now the work begins. We have to bring them home. And, you know, tonight, I'm going to be signing on the J6 hostages, pardons, to get them out. And as soon as I leave, I'm going to the Oval Office and we'll be signing pardons for a lot of people, a lot of people. And thank you to Steve Witkoff. He's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. He's been a very successful man. He's a great negotiator. He's a wonderful guy. People love him. And he's got a tremendous power of persuasion. And that's what we need. We don't need stiffs. We don't need stiffs. We got a lot of stiffs. You just had a whole load of them. And to the former hostages with us today, welcome. And welcome home. Some of the folks are former hostages, not a good situation. The 3 young ladies that came home yesterday, you saw that. More coming home every day now. They're coming home. But they were hurt. They were hurt. They were hurt. One had her head blown off, fingers on her hand, and her hand indeed was blown off. She was trying to defend herself from a bullet being fired. Do you believe this? A bullet knocked off her hand. I don't know. You look at it, it's a disgrace. We never stopped praying for you, and we're so glad that you're reunited with your friends and families, and God bless you all. And some of them are just saying, no, my son is gone, but please just bring home his body. Right, Steve? Many of you have told me that your son is gone, but bring home his body. It should have never happened. 3 years, it's ridiculous. Should have never happened. Wouldn't have happened. I also want to express my tremendous gratitude to the hundreds of thousands of proud American patriots who came from all across the country to join us in this celebration. It's a celebration of a big win. And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast. We're going to bring it back faster. Let us also thank the incredible service members, National Guardsmen, police, Secret Service, and law enforcement personnel who are keeping us all safe, even though, and they are great people. New York's finest. I grew up with New York's finest, and we got to give them their authority back. You won't have any crime. There'll be no crime. You give them little authority back. The whole way they run things in this country now, it's disgraceful. But it's going to change rapidly. We're going to make our cities safe again, too. Even though we're indoors, we've had a magnificent inaugural parade. And let's give a big round of applause. They were great. To all of the incredible performers and hardworking men and women who made it possible. Those people, really talented, amazing people. I also want to thank my wonderful family for being here, especially my beautiful wife, our First Lady, Melania. I love our First Lady. And also, J.D. How good has J.D. been? And his beautiful wife, Usha. How good is J.B.? J.D. has been great. He's another good negotiator, Steve. He's a great negotiator, too. We need negotiators in this country. But so many of the people on the stage behind, not only family members, as an example, Lara Trump, the wife of Eric. She was the head of the Republican Party, along with my friend Michael. Stand up, the two of you. What a job. What a job they did. They worked so hard. They knew they'd be rigging, but they said, we're going to make it too big to rig, and we did. We made it too big to rig. We won every swing state by a lot. We won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. We won the whole ball of wax. And now we're going to go and drill, baby, drill, and do all the things that we've wanted to do and bring your costs down, your prices down, and make our country safe. So thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much. What a job you've done, Michael. I'm never moving you, you know. He was thinking about getting a nice job in the administration. I said, no, I'm leaving you right where you are. You've done a very good job. We're not moving you, Michael. I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. Right here with us also in the arena, I'm about to sign some very important executive orders of our new administration. Hey, Don, will you stand up, please? Don is another one. How about Don? This guy. He's a popular one. He goes out and speaks. He gets a big crowd. He's a little on the rough side sometimes, but that's what you want. He's done a fantastic job, and he loves our country. Thanks, Don. Great job. You've done a great job. And Ivanka. And you know, Jared negotiated the Abraham Accords, which are it's the biggest deal made in the Middle East in many, many years, and it's really something. Jared, stand up, Jared. The Abraham Accords. And Tiffany's going to have a little baby. And Michael. And then I have a very tall son named Barron. Has anyone ever heard of him? Thank you. He knew the youth vote. You know, we won the youth vote by 36 points. And he was saying, Dad, you got to go out and do this one or that one. And we did a lot of them. And he respects them all. He understood them very well. And he said, Dad, you got to go out, do Joe Rogan, do all these guys. And we did. We did. And Joe Rogan was great. They were all great, right? Aaron, they were all good. He understood the market. Another famous one, how about Kai? Stand up, Kai. Is that Byron Donalds back there? Stand up, Byron. Stand up. What a future this one has. What a future. That's great, Byron. Thank you very much. And how about Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce? He's going to take in more money than any country has ever even thought about. He's going to take in some money. And we have many others. Look, I'm not going to go through it, but we're going to sign some orders right now, and that's really what I want to do. So we're going to sign executive orders. First, I'll revoke nearly 80 destructive and radical executive actions of the previous administration, one of the worst administrations in history, maybe not one of them, the worst. Anybody that would allow millions of people to pour through our borders from jails, prisons, mental institutions, insane asylums, gang members to be taken off the streets of Venezuela and deposited in our country, and many, not just Venezuela. You know, crime in Venezuela is down 74% because they took their criminals and gave them to us through an open border policy of the previous administration. All over the world, they're emptying their prisons into our country. They're emptying their mental institutions into our country. It stops as of 1 o'clock this afternoon, okay? It stops. So I'm revoking nearly 80 destructive, radical executive actions of the previous administration. They'll all be null and void within about, what, 5 minutes? Is that them over there? 5 minutes? And next, to gain immediate control of the vast federal, out-of-control bureaucracy, I will implement an immediate regulation freeze, which will stop Biden bureaucrats from continuing to regulate. Most of those bureaucrats are being fired. They're gone. Should be all of them, but some sneak through, but we have to live with a couple, I guess. I'll also issue a temporary hiring freeze to ensure that we're only hiring competent people who are faithful to the American public. And we will pause the hiring of any new IRS agents. We will also require that federal workers must return to the office in person. And we're going to take the 88,000 people that they hired to go after you with guns. By the way, they're allowed to use guns and harass you like they were so many other people. Remember this? Okay, remember? Do you remember a little statement about tips? Does anybody remember that little statement? I think we won Nevada because of that statement. But they went out and harassed you over the tips. In other words, we are restoring control of our government to the people. We're going to take those 88,000. Let's see if they'd like to work on the border, because that's where we want them, really. So we're going to have no tax on tips, right? No tax on tips. And we may have, like the Speaker of the House, is he here? He's done such a good job. Is Mike here? He's around here someplace. I saw him just a little while ago. Hello, fellas. Look at you guys. Yeah, I know it. He's great. He's doing great. They're all doing good. The Republican Party has never been unified like it is right now. They want to save our country. And we're going to more than save it. We're going to make it greater than it's ever been before by a lot. Next, I'm going to sign a presidential memorandum directing every member of my cabinet to marshal every power at their disposal to defeat inflation and rapidly bring down the cost of daily life, because your costs have gone through the roof in the last 4 years. Perhaps you didn't notice. Does anyone notice their costs are like double, triple, quadruple? You can't buy bacon. Apples have doubled in price. You want an apple, anybody? Pay twice what you did 2 years ago. We'll put more money in your pocket, and we'll bring back the American dream and to reduce energy costs and liberate our economy. So we have more oil and gas than any country in the world, and we're going to use it. We're not going to do the wind thing. Big, ugly windmills, they ruin your neighborhood. They ruin you. If you have a house that's near a windmill, guess what? Your house is worth less than half. And did you see up in New England with the whales? You see what's happening? So they had 2 whales killed in about 14 years. Last year and the year before, total, they had 28. So if you're into whales, you don't want windmills either. And they're the most expensive form of energy that you can have by far. And they're all made in China, by the way, practically all of them. And they kill your birds and they ruin your beautiful landscapes. But other than that, I think they're quite good, right? Now, remember when we used to joke and kid when we were kidding, but we don't kid anymore? They want to watch the debates on television. They want to watch your favorite president on television. But the wind isn't blowing, so we can't watch television that night, Gladys. Remember? Gladys, I'm sorry, the wind is just not blowing. We're not watching Trump tonight. But I'm immediately withdrawing from the unfair, one-sided Paris Climate Accord ripoff. The United States will not sabotage our own industries while China pollutes with impunity. You know, China, I mean, look, they use a lot of dirty energy, but they produce a lot of energy. And when that stuff goes up in the air, you know, it doesn't stay there. It's not like you got a wall. We love walls, don't we? Not like you have a wall around and it doesn't. It floats into the United States of America after 3.5 to 5.5 days. It floats across the oceans, and it comes right over your neighborhood, and it falls into your neighborhood. So they all say, we have to fight for cleaner air, but the other dirty air is dropping all over us. So what the hell are they talking about? Unless everybody does it, it just doesn't work. You know, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water that this country's ever had under the Trump administration, and we didn't do anything to stop jobs and stop production. Believe me, you're going to see a lot of companies come pouring back because tariffs. I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Then I was reprimanded by the fake news. They said, what about love, religion, and God? I said, I agree. Let's put God number 1. Let's put religion number 2. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number 3, I guess, right? And then it's tariff. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us. And I'll also sign an executive order to immediately end federal government censorship of the American people. In America, we believe in free speech, and we're bringing it back starting today to stop the weaponization. Oh, do I know about that? These creeps. Deranged Jack Smith. You ever hear of him? Deranged. He's a deranged prosecutor. He's sick. They suck him on me. He's now been reduced to getting on an airplane, going back to The Hague or wherever the hell he came from. We got to get rid of that guy. Hey, was he one of the many people that got a pardon today? Did they pardon Jack Smith? You know, did you know that Biden, while I was making my speech, pardoned his whole family? The brother, the whole deal was pardoned. Can you imagine that? While I was making my speech. Did everybody hear my speech? Did you like my speech? Thank you. I mean, the only thing wrong with it is I had a lot of tough things to say, and I have some great people that work for me. Sir, this is such a great speech. It's so unifying. Don't talk about Biden with his pardons of his family. We want a unified country. They said, don't talk about the J6 hostages that you're going to be releasing today. Sir, don't put that in your speech, please. I said, but I want to put it in my speech. They said, sir, it won't be unified like it is. It's so beautiful the way it is. And it is getting great reviews. You know, if I put things like that in, I'll get terrible reviews. One little paragraph that's a little bit wrong, the fake news goes crazy, right? So I said, all right, I won't put it in my speech, but you know what? I'm speaking in front of a hell of a lot of people at a place called Capital One Arena, and I'll talk about it there. So we're going to be going over the beautiful Oval Office, one of the great offices in history. Even if it wasn't beautiful, it's the Oval Office, but it is beautiful. And we love the Oval Office. It all starts with the wars start and end there. Everything starts and ends at the Oval Office. We love it. But we're going to go to the Oval Office. We're going to sign. We're going to release our great hostages that didn't do, for the most part, they didn't do stuff wrong. You take a look at what went on, and look what happens in other parts of the country. In Portland, where they kill people, they destroy the city. Nothing happens to them. In Seattle, where they took over a big chunk of the city, nothing happened. Minneapolis, where they burned down the city, Nothing happened. Essentially nothing happened. All they want to do is go after the J6 hostages. A 76-year-old grandmother was arrested the other day because she was looking, I think because she was looking at the Capitol or something like that. No, we're not going to put up with that crap anymore. And to stop the weaponization of law enforcement, I've been investigated more than any human being in the world. I believe I have the all-time record. Every day a subpoena. Every single day would get subpoenas. I was more than any person. Alphonse Capone, remember I used to talk about it? Now, Alphonse Capone, Scarface, he was a pretty rough guy. He was investigated about 1/100th what Trump was investigated. My father's looking down at me, my mother, that, how the hell did this happen? You know what it is? They investigated their political opponent, the opponent of Biden, and then ultimately Kamala. Has anyone ever heard of Kamala? We had to beat two opponents, you know? We had to beat Biden, then we beat him. Now he goes on top. The guy was like 39 points down. I think I could have beaten Trump. They should have left me in. I would have beaten. No, his debate performance wasn't the best, right? That's what killed him. And then they had a change, and it's like you get into a fight. The great Dana White spoke last night. We love Dana White, right? UFC. That's like he puts in two fighters. One of them's getting creamed, getting really beaten, and they say, all right, take him out. Let's put somebody else in to finish up the fight. That's what they did to us. They gave us somebody new, but we took care of both of them. So we beat actually two opponents. But to stop the weaponization of law enforcement and our government, I will also sign an order directing every federal agency to preserve all records pertaining to political persecutions under the last administration, of which there were many, and beginning the process of exposing any and all abuses of power, even though he's pardoned many of these people. Can you believe it? He's pardoned them. You know why he did it while I was speaking? Because that way I couldn't speak about it. I was speaking. I didn't know he did it. I finished my speech, and they said, sir, he pardoned his whole family. I said, oh, can I go back out there and talk about it? Somehow that wouldn't be very elegant. Our First Lady would say, please don't do that. But we have plenty of time to talk about it, and we will. We're doing all of this on our very first day in office. You know, don't forget, we've been in this position, really, where we won the primaries in record time. We were the fastest win of a primary ever in political history, which is a very nice thing. It's nice to know. Well, the second election was rigged, so we knew we were doing well. And if it wasn't, you know what? If it wasn't, I would have never run. But the third one was just a monster. Boy, was that a big one, huh? That was a big one. On the second one, we got like 10 or 12 million votes more than the first one. How about that? We did great on the first one. We did much better on the second one. But bad did we do well on the third one. So we're gonna have some fun. It's very simple. We're gonna make our country great. We're gonna make our country great again. We're gonna make America great again. How good a name is MAGA, though, right? You know? I was going to say, keep America great, but unfortunately it wasn't great. Can't say keep it great. It will be great again, but CAG, keep America great, CAG, I don't think it's ever going to replace MAGA. Does anybody like CAG? I don't think so. It's never replacing MAGA. Nothing will ever replace MAGA. MAGA was the most successful political operation, political movement in the history of our country, maybe in the history of the world. Let's see what happens, because we're not finished yet. We're not finished yet. We got a long way to go. But we're doing this on the very first day in office, and in just a few moments, I'm not only signing the release of the J6 hostages, I'm signing other things that you're going to love. Oh, you're going to be happy reading newspapers tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So I just want to thank, I mean, look at this place. It's full to the rafters. You don't have any. Look at those people up there. You don't have any empty seats. And by the way, the Capital One owners, they are so good. We got to root for their teams because they have been so great to MAGA, to us. And I just want to thank Ted and everybody. You guys have been fantastic. And the ice hockey team's doing great. Ovechkin's pretty good, right? They're doing great. So I want to thank them, Capital One arena owners. They have been absolutely fantastic. And thank you once again to everyone. And I can only tell you, you're going to be very happy. You're going to watch a lot of good things happen. We got to stop some wars that are happening and going on. Some stupid things are happening. The war with Ukraine would have never happened, and it has. As you know, Israel would have never been hit on October 7th, and none of you would be up here. None of you would even know anything about this tragedy that you're going through right now. But Iran was broke. Anybody that bought oil from Iran, they couldn't do any business with us. You're not going to do business with America. China passed, everybody passed. They were broke. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. And your sons would be alive, and they certainly wouldn't be incarcerated like they are. It's such a shame. But we're getting a lot of people out in a short period of time. So I'm going to go right over to here, and I'm going to sign in front of you. Is that okay? Good. JD, why don't you come down? You have that other one to sign?
Sorry, what's it?
You have the other one to sign?
We don't have it over here yet, sir. We'll have it for you back at the oval. The first is the rescissions of 78 Biden-era EOs and presidential memoranda.
You want to call it up? You want to say it? You want to say it?
Oh, if you want me to, sir.
Why don't you say what I'm signing?
Sure. The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The second item, President Trump, is a regulatory freeze, as you announced in your speech, preventing bureaucrats from issuing any more regulations until we have full control of this, the government and this administration. Thank you, sir.
Sir, can I have a pen?
The next item, sir, is a freeze on all federal hiring, excepting the military and a number of other excluded categories, again, until full control of the government is achieved and we understand the objectives of government going forward.
Could you imagine Biden doing this? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Sir, the next item, as you announced in your speech, is a requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work immediately. Thank you, sir. Next, we have a directive to every department and agency in the federal government to address the cost of living crisis that has cost Americans so dearly. Thank you, sir. The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty. Yes, sir. We're going to save over $1 trillion by withdrawing from that treaty. And the next item, sir, is a letter that will be transmitted to the United Nations explaining that we are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty. Thank you, sir. This next item is a directive to the federal government ordering the restoration of freedom of speech and preventing government censorship of free speech going forward. And lastly, sir, before we go back to the Oval Office to sign a large number of other items, is a directive to the federal government ending the weaponization of government against the political adversaries of the previous administration, as we've seen. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Pretty fun job.
Well, we are just wrapping up here. Trump just signed a handful of executive orders, and he signed every single executive order with a different pen, and he's currently throwing those pens into the audience for people who are there to catch and take home as a memento of this day. He signed a flurry of executive orders. Now, I will say, it is unclear what the implementation of some of these executive orders really look like. A couple of them are very clear in terms of asking federal workers to return to work full-time, to be in the office 5 days a week. That is one executive order that he signed. A freeze on federal hiring, except for the military. Another one that he signed, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty, and then writing a letter to the United Nations explaining that they are doing so. Those are really the more tangible ones that we have seen. But there are some other ones that he talked about relating to free speech. He said he's directing the federal government to order the restoration of freedom of speech and preventing government censorship. And he's also signed a treaty or a executive order, rather, to end the weaponization of government against previous administrations, and one to address the cost of living crisis. Now, if you look at these are a lot of the themes that we saw throughout the campaign, talking about the cost of living, talking about climate, and that not necessarily being a priority for this administration. In his speech this morning, he talked about drilling here and using our resources here. So obviously the Paris Climate Treaty doesn't fit in with that, talking about the weaponization of government. Andrew, this is really just a little bit of all of the different issues that we've seen him talk about over the last year, but really he's been campaigning, I would say, for the last 4 years.
Yeah, and one of the biggest that we didn't see him sign there a moment ago has to do with those January 6th, in his words, prisoners. He signaled in that speech that there would be pardons coming. Now, the extent of the pardons, if it is a blanket pardon, if there are some specifications for who does and does not qualify, we've been following that really since President Donald Trump was elected. His campaign had said at some point that it would be on a case-by-case basis, but we can expect, as we heard foreshadowed there, there's going to be more executive action later on, even today, and certainly going into tomorrow, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it was not lost on me that he called them January 6th hostages as he was standing in front of Noah Argamani, who was a hostage in Gaza for roughly a year. He brought these families on stage saying that he was going to bring their loved ones home. There are a few families there that are expecting their loved ones in phase 1. Another one, Adon Alexander, in phase 2, and then other family members that were on stage today that their loved one is dead and they are hoping to bring home their body. So he brought them on stage to talk about this issue, and then they ended up standing on stage behind him for the duration of this speech. One other thing we didn't hear him or see him sign in terms of executive orders is immigration, and we know that there's multiple executive orders coming that have to do with this immigration issue. And so I think that was really the big thing that some people might have been looking for here, since that was really the galvanizing force, I would say, during his inaugural address and during different things that we have heard over the course of the day. But I'm sure his supporters will be paying attention to the ones that he signs in the Oval Office as well.
Absolutely, and a little bit more news. We are seeing reports that Marco Rubio was just confirmed. He would be the first member of Donald Trump's cabinet officially confirmed just a moment ago. So, with that said, a busy day here in Washington. Thank you all for joining us for our coverage throughout the day of Donald Trump's second inauguration. We're going to have more analysis tomorrow on Morning Rush. You can catch me starting at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. Thank you for watching Scripps News.
I was once in your shoes. I said I was.
Today, on It Takes a Killer, a serial killer terrorizes Jacksonville, Florida, strangling young women to death, then callously disposing of their bodies. Law enforcement is powerless to stop the fast and furious killing spree until crimes from this murderer's past come back to haunt him. Jacksonville, Florida, Tuesday, December 17th, 2002. 18-year-old Nicole Williams is at home with her grandmother when she receives a phone call.
She informs her grandmother she has to go and cash a check.
All of a sudden, she leaves. That's the last time her grandmother ever saw her.
Several hours later, when Nicole fails to return home, her family reports her missing to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department. 2 days pass. Then on Thursday, December 19th, a man sitting in his car at a railroad crossing spots a light blue blanket on the side of the road.
He walks over. He sees it's a body. The police were called, and it turns out this victim was, in fact, identified as Nicole Williams, and she was asphyxiated.
Homicide detectives examine Williams' phone records, curious about the urgent call she'd taken right before she disappeared.
One of the things they find is approximately 16 phone calls that are placed to her phone in the previous 10 days, but they have no idea where these calls are being generated from.
Northeast Jacksonville, Sunday, December 29th, 2002, 9:40 p.m. 19-year-old mother Nikia Kilpatrick is home in her apartment with her 2-year-old and 11-month-old sons when she's visited by her sister Rhonda. As the sisters chat, Nikia receives a mysterious phone call.
Sometime after Nikia's sister Rhonda leaves, she calls back up Nikia. Suddenly that phone conversation is in fact cut short. And that's the last time she ever heard from her.
Wednesday, January 1st, 2003, Kilpatrick's cousin Sarah, who lives in the same apartment complex, knocks on Nikia's door. Over the past 2 days, she's tried to contact Nikia repeatedly, but has never gotten a response. This time, she sees movement through the blinds.
The 2-year-old was looking out the window. That's not right.
Nikia's cousin calls the police. They go inside the residence. What do they find? Nikia lying on the floor, clearly dead, with indications that her hands had been tied beforehand.
She has ligature marks. She has a coaxial cable wrapped around her neck. She's been strangulated. So obviously we're looking at a homicide.
Although Nikia's residence was in tip-top shape the last time anyone was there, it was in total disarray now. It was a very disorganized and messy crime scene. The police examined the scene, including Nikia's body, but no valuable evidence was found.
Law enforcement doesn't find any signs of forced entry, so robbery is ruled out as a motive.
Autopsy is conducted on Nikia. Finds out she was in fact pregnant at the time of her murder.
Detectives talked to Nikia's boyfriend, the father of her unborn child. He was initially considered a suspect as there was some history of domestic abuse in their past, but he had an alibi, and he was ruled out.
With no other leads, the case goes cold, quickly. Arlington, Jacksonville, Thursday, January 9th, 2003, 6 p.m. 20-year-old nursing assistant Shawanda McAllister is at home with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Rashid Topi.
She and her boyfriend are doing laundry together.
And at about 7 o'clock that night, he left to go to school.
Sometime after 9 p.m., Rashid returns home, but can't get inside Shawanda's apartment. Their relationship is complicated. She's currently 3 months pregnant with his child, but he recently started seeing another woman.
He left his keys in another woman's car. He knocks on the door. You can hear the TV. There's no response whatsoever coming from inside the apartment.
He decides to run some errands.
Rashid returns later that evening. He knocks on the door again. Still, there's no answer. He walks over to the window and calls out Shawanda's name.
But instead, he hears the response from a male voice. And the disembodied male voice off in the distance merely says, "Shawanda doesn't want to see you anymore. Leave her alone."
He's somewhat stunned by that. He can hear McAllister's voice inside.
Rashid asks if he can get his work clothes.
Basically, they summarily pack up his stuff and toss it to him out of a window.
He then heard Shawanda's voice say, "Come back here around 1 o'clock. He left and decided he would.
Rashid returns to the residence one final time.
He's knocking, he's calling, no response. He finally winds up breaking a window, unlocking the door, and walking in. He makes his way into the bedroom. What does he see? Shawanda lying on the floor, half naked, with her arms and legs both tied up. There's also a slip knot cord wrapped around her neck. It's clear she's been strangled.
At that point, he runs and starts screaming, "Somebody call the police, my girlfriend's been killed."
Police arrive within minutes. As CSI processes the crime scene, they find two critical pieces of evidence.
While examining the interior of Shawanda McAllister's residence, police found an ATM receipt. It was for $280 withdrawn from Shawanda's account only a few hours earlier. However, the cash was not found anywhere.
On the floor, underneath the bedspread, investigators find an even bigger clue, a used condom, which they hope will yield the DNA of Shawanda's killer.
At the same time, the interior of the residence was being examined for evidence. Other detectives were going through the neighborhood doing a canvass.
Two neighbors come forward with identical eyewitness accounts.
One neighbor told them sometime around 9:30 or so, they saw a Gator City cab sitting outside the vicinity of Shawanda's apartment. Then about 45 minutes later, that same neighbor came out and saw a thin black male getting into it and driving away. And this was about 20 or 30 minutes before Rashid showed up and started yelling that his girlfriend had been murdered.
Another individual states that he not only saw the driver, African American, who not only exited the vehicle, but actually walked to Shawanda's house.
Saturday, January 11th, 2003, a man calls 911 from a payphone, claiming to have information about the incident involving Shawanda McAllister.
Police receive an anonymous tip that Rashid Topay is actually the murder suspect, that McAllister did not want the child, and therefore Rashid killed her because he wanted the child.
Because he was at the scene and discovered the body, Shawanda's boyfriend is considered an early suspect.
Within a few days, and after the full investigation of Rashid Topay and his full cooperation with the police, they decide that he, in fact, is not responsible for his girlfriend's murder. He is ruled out as a suspect in her homicide.
Coming up, cops hunt a cold-blooded killer who remains one step ahead. You're watching It Takes a Killer. January 2003, police in Jacksonville, Florida are investigating the murders of 3 women, Nicole Williams, Nikia Kilpatrick, and Shawanda McAllister. Law enforcement doesn't have any evidence connecting the crimes, but they suspect that the same perpetrator murdered all 3 women, especially since the Kilpatrick and McAllister murders took place less than a mile apart.
Both McAllister and Kilpatrick have similarities in the MO. They're both young African-American women. Both of them are pregnant. Both of them have been strangled. It certainly ties the two together.
Cops find little evidence at the Williams and Kilpatrick crime scenes, but they do retrieve an ATM receipt from Shawanda McAllister's home. The receipt shows that someone withdrew $280 from her account at 8:53 p.m. on January 9th, just hours before she'd been murdered.
The police get the surveillance video from the ATM.
What they find is it shows McAllister. She's the one that's actually withdrawing the funds from her ATM. However, directly in the background, what they're able to see is a Gator City cab.
Eyewitnesses did report seeing a tall African-American man driving a Gator City cab in the vicinity of Shawanda's apartment complex the night she was killed.
Police knew they had to find the driver of that cab, either as a witness or as a very possible suspect. Upon a detailed review of the Gator City cab's records for January 9th, Shawanda McAllister was in fact a passenger. And actually 3 separate cabbies drove her that day. One of them was Ronald Wimpy, another was Larry Lake, and the third was Paul DeRusso.
Jacksonville, Florida, Monday, January 20th, 2003. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Department receives a missing persons report on 17-year-old Giovanna Jefferson. Her family hasn't seen her for more than 24 hours, since 9 a.m. the previous morning.
Giovanna told her aunt that she was going to go out and meet with a man named Dee, and that Dee was a cab driver.
A few hours after her aunt last saw her, she gets a strange phone call from Giovanna. Giovanna's telling her aunt that she's with Dee, but he's holding her. The aunt gets on the phone and pleads with Dee to allow her niece to leave, but to no avail. She never saw her niece again.
Detectives pore over Giovanna's phone records.
One of the names that pops up is Paul DeRusso.
The same Paul DeRusso who driven Shawanda McAllister in his cab the day she died.
The detective calls Paul DeRusso. She asks him if she knows anyone by the name of Giovanna Jefferson. He says no, and that was the end of that brief conversation. However, a day or so later, DeRusso calls the detective back and says in so many words, well, wait a minute, I saw the missing flyer of Giovanna, and yeah, I did pick her up sometime in mid-January and gave her a ride.
The lead investigator on Giovanna's missing persons case runs Paul DeRusso's criminal history. She soon discovers DeRusso is a registered sex offender.
The detective found out in the year 2001 he was arrested for rape. And strangely, just days after Giovanna goes missing, DeRusso quits his cab company job.
Detectives go to Gator Cab Company and they find his cab. They're looking for trace evidence. The unfortunate thing is it's been cleaned multiple times since he left.
Still, law enforcement catches a big break when they find out that DeRusso had given a DNA sample during his 2001 rape arrest. That sample remains in cold storage at the Florida State Crime Lab.
So what they're going to do now is they're going to take DNA samplings, trace evidence from all the other crime sites. We're going to see if we have a match.
Investigators must wait several days for the results. In the meantime, they speak with Larry Lake, a colleague of DeRusso's from Gator City Cab Company.
Larry Lake happened to be the training driver for Paul DeRusso on one of the first nights he worked. Mr. Lake confirmed that he and DeRusso together picked up Shawanda McAllister, but there wasn't much verbal interaction between McAllister and DeRusso. However, just a few hours later, DeRusso was driving on his own.
Could Paul DeRusso be the killer cops are looking for? Jacksonville, Florida, Wednesday, February 5th, 2003, 10:30 a.m. A construction worker is clearing a vacant lot with his front loader and makes a grisly discovery: the body of missing teenager Giovanna Jefferson.
Detectives arrive at the location. Not only did they find her body, but now we find his second body.
The second victim is identified as 19-year-old Sarita Cohen. Cohen's mother had just reported Sarita missing the day before, but last saw her daughter on January 30th.
Both young African-American women have been strangulated. Both have ligature marks. Wrists are bound.
The Jacksonville police believe that these victims at the construction site are the 4th and 5th victims of possibly the same killer.
Coming up, cops zero in on Paul DeRusso. But is he the murderer they're looking for? By mid-February 2003, a serial killer has strangled 5 young African-American women to death in Jacksonville, Florida. Homicide detectives suspect the savage murderer is 32-year-old former cab driver Paul DeRusso.
We have the fact that he's a registered sex offender. We have the fact that the tying into the Gator City Cab Company. We have a commonality among all of the victims that seem to have some kind of relationship with Paul DeRusso.
With the DNA results not back yet from the lab, the police don't quite have the probable cause to arrest Paul DeRusso on these murders.
Still, police devise a plan to get DeRusso off the streets.
They found that there's a stolen DVD player, which is in Paul DeRusso's name in a pawn shop.
With an arrest warrant in hand for the theft of a DVD player, the police locate DeRusso at his wife's home.
Jacksonville, Florida, Thursday, February 6th, 2003, 8:40 p.m. Police take Paul DeRusso into custody. Their arrest warrant is for dealing in stolen property, but they're able to hold him on parole violations stemming from his 2001 rape conviction.
We picked her up, took her to the bank, took her to the bus stop, and took her to her job.